Hi, my name is Michael Friedlander, and welcome to the Gift Tree. As I hope you'll know by now, the Gift Tree is a storytelling program. We tell stories that offer gifts that we hope will make a difference for the better in the lives of those we touch. In each case, the storyteller will offer a gift or gifts that have made a difference for the better in his or her life, but we leave it to you to take whatever gifts you like from the stories told. And without further ado, let me introduce you to our storyteller today. Our storyteller today is again Vishal Amin. Vishal is heading our Veterans Outreach Program, and he's a decorated Marine Corps fighter pilot. But as you'll hear, he's also much more than that. The first story he shared with us we called A Marine's Mindset, and that story was about him qualifying as an F-18 fighter pilot at Miramar, the home of Top Gun. And the gift that he offered in that story is what he characterized as his mindset in the Marine Corps, namely, that failure isn't an option, and that if you allow it to be an option, you're much more likely indeed to fail. His next story is also a remarkable one, and one we've decided to call, If It Could Happen to Me. To fully appreciate it, though, it's necessary to know where his career led him after being awarded his wings to fly the F-18. The story he's going to tell is about a day that changed his life and career forever. And the gift of his story, true to our brand, applies to absolutely everyone. So, Vishal's story today begins with me asking him the question of what happened after he was awarded his wings. But before that, and for those of you who haven't yet heard the gift of his first story in his own words, I thought I'd play a little of him talking about that gift just before I ask my question. One reason for this is that the gift of that first story is how he faced the challenge that indeed changed his life. And of course, that's what this story is all about. So, let's get going.
The gift there is simple. Live your life as if maybe there was no tomorrow, but more simply put, every decision you make should be as if failure was not an option. You should never feel that there's another way out. The path you chose is the path you chose. Make every opportunity, whether it be a failed event or something horrible happening, into an experience, and then keep that journey going. Find a way to succeed. There is a way. Failure is not an option. No, that is the gift. It's not, yeah.
Well, that's a great story. So just quickly, Where did you go from there?
I went into the fleet. I went into the Marine Corps as an F-18 aircrew backseater, flew F-18s, and had a great career flying around the world. And then I think totally different. I mean, this is a definitely different experience, but I built a lot of professional qualifications in that time frame and got to meet people everywhere and build a lot of mission qualifications. After a couple tours of duty in the F-18, I found myself being asked to go serve in Qatar as a liaison. And it wasn't just any liaison gig. Actually, I was in Maui on the second week of a vacation with my wife that we promised her, and I got a phone call saying, hey, you need to come home. I had to keep the butter knife out of my wife's hand on Air Alaska on the way back to cutting that vacation short. And within 48 hours of me touching foot back into the continental United States, I was on another airplane to the Middle East for a 3-week business trip to liaise and advise U.S. Central Command, Joint Chiefs of Staff, and our four-star generals. And I went out there and I did my due diligence, and I was the subject matter expert for a weapons systems, which they needed my opinion on. The government had shut down, and I had all of a sudden been permanently appointed as the lead liaison officer in charge of that weapon system that I was advising. There was me, and there was the general and the Joint Chiefs of Staff kind of overseeing that project. And
you can't tell us what the weapon system is.
I mean, I could tell. It was a aviation reconnaissance system, right? I'll leave it at that. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of weapon systems, but a lot of it wasn't secret. A lot of it was just knowing something, right? And being the liaison, being the person in the middle, and the person to relate the customer to the action to the end user, right? However you want to say it. And I thought in my life I'd made it. I'm advising, in essence, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the central commander of the U.S. Central Commander for all military operations in the Middle East, aviation centric, and I was in my mid 30s. I mean, if you haven't made it at that point and that's what you're influencing, I didn't realize that was a normal to me. I was more concerned that the government shut down and I couldn't get back home. I ended up staying out there for 6 months, being that advisor. And I went back and I did a ground tour, and with it not too far fetched or in timeline from then, I went on a ground tour and I became a forward air controller and an air officer. And I was asked to work with our Joint Special Operations Command and our Pacific Fleet through the Marine Corps. And I served as a subject matter expert and helped with a team into the Pacific region with Special Operations Command Pacific. But there's a neat little story there. I mean, I went from talking and advising generals and Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I would say within a year from then, just under a year from that moment, I was sitting in the desert of Saudi Arabia and a couple other countries, traveling between all of them. But in this particular case, in Saudi Arabia, in the middle of the desert, eating camel with the king. I have no idea how I got there, right? It was like I woke up and it was in the middle of the Sahara or something. I was in Saudi Arabia, but you look around and, you're asking questions like, why this camel versus this camel? How are we going to eat it? What's the culture? What is the people like? And what I was doing in essence was building a relationship with that government. And I was advising on aviation centric operations, on how to conduct business, how to partner with our coalition forces. And not too many months after that, actually 3 months, just less than 3 months from that day, I was in the jungles of the Philippines, advising on weapons systems for the Department of State through Special Operations Command. And I had a kind of like a beard like I do now, wearing a ball cap, getting escorted around in big black cars, and kind of being, engulfed in the population and the culture. And I looked out of place, so did my team. Mm-hmm. But from there, that was the last deployment I'd ever done. And coming from humble beginnings of being an enlisted man, a military policeman, even being a fighter pilot and getting to do that, to in 2012, 13, all the way into 2014, from hitting those wickets that I never thought I'd be at, from just a standard military guy to U.S. Central Command, to desert of Saudi Arabia, and then jungles of the Philippines, meeting with the state leaders, along with our Department of State individuals and private companies, doing things that most people don't get to do. And then in March 21st of 2015 is where my world was changed forever. Because of what I was doing and what I was involved with, my identity was associated, and not just, maybe not my physical identity as it is now, but my identity of practice, my identity of operations, my face, the way I conducted business, that identity was associated with progress, maybe something that was threatening. And I remember on March 21st of 2015, I was driving down the 91 freeway in Los Angeles County, and I like to use the word driving loosely because nobody drives down the 91 freeway. You're usually stuck in traffic. There's usually construction, right? It was dusk. It was sunset time frame, just prior to, and I was driving down with my wife, and it was just after I'd returned home from my last deployment, where I met my son for the first time in the airport. We were in LA and we were enjoying our lives together. And I got a phone call. Or excuse me, the first thing, yeah, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine. He said, "Hey, are you okay? Are you carrying a weapon on you?" I was like, "What kind of question is that? What do you mean am I carrying a weapon on me?" Nice to hear from you, number one. He's like, "No, have you seen the news?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Look at the news." I was like, "Okay." And I look over at my wife and she's on her phone and she's scrolling on her iPhone. And I kind of see her finger pause and she's looking at a page and I just see kind of white and black, right? And I see her face and it is my wife's half Norwegian, half Irish, but her face goes pale white, like a ghost. Eyes just big, just kind of looking, you know. And I look over and I kind of look over and I'm like, what's that? You know, and it's the big black ISIS flag. And I was like, scroll down. She scrolls down and she sees a picture of some Navy admirals, guys that I know, I've worked with, some pilots that were on some ships that we were operating with. Oh, again, I know that name. Keep going down, keep going down. This was a list of 100 people. And she keeps going down. And there it was, second to last page, top right corner. There was a picture of me and my wife with my hand around her, with holding my daughter. When I had first met her, when I came home from a deployment years back. I don't have social media. I didn't have it at that moment. That picture was, no, I didn't own that picture. And it was my address and all my personal information, my home address and my phone number and my name and anything you needed to personally identify me in my city and know how I lived and where I lived. And it was on there. More importantly, there was a message and it said, these are our top 100 individuals to kill from the Islamic State, or that are operating against the Islamic State. Go to their homes, kill their families, kill them in our name, to lone wolves, to any sympathizers. At that moment, my life had changed forever. I lived for months with FBI protection, with Joint Terrorism Task Force, with NCIS, working with those agencies, working with the congressman, working with the senator. And for me, it became the normal, right? And for me, it was one of those, what do we do now? We moved our home. We did everything we had to do. And there's been additional leaks since then. There's been additional things, but this one was bad. Yeah, and we changed the way we lived our lives. And, there came a point where I decided to do something different. I realized that, you know what? I'm passionate about something. I don't know what it is. And I realized it's my identity. Who's not passionate about their identity? That's through jobs, through sports, what is the point of social media, right? What's the point of Facebook? What's the point of LinkedIn? To brand yourself, your identity, right? Well, my identity was branded for me. And how do you go from what had happened to me to educate people and show them your identity is important, and the way you manage that identity and the way you brand yourself is important. And I think the gift here is simple. Know the importance of your identity. Be aware of the vulnerabilities out there. Be aware of the dangers of protecting your data. Because for me, the simple mismanagement of security solutions within a global organization that spent over $5 billion on protecting my identity, the simple mismanagement of that identity changed my life. Now imagine what can happen to school children, to teenagers, to college kids, to generations past and present, to us sitting in this room. I'm not saying we should all go behind firewalls and barriers and blockade ourselves from the world. I'm saying we have to be knowledgeable about the dangers out there, and that our identity is important and people want it, and you have to know that. That's
Wow,
it.
what an interesting story. But sadly, we run out of time, and as I think I may have mentioned during Vishal's first story, we're absolutely delighted that he's agreed to lead our Veterans Outreach Program, at which we'll be offering vets a platform to tell their stories and share their gifts with us all. And again, I just wanted to thank on behalf of everyone, Vishal for his story and gift and for his service. I do look forward, though, to connecting with you all again soon. In our next podcast, I'll be introducing you to Steve Burrows, CBE, a world-renowned civil and structural engineer and a co-founder of the Gift Tree, actually, who will be sharing a story with you about the value of learning from the past. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to connecting again.